Hello and welcome to yet another tutorial by Davies Media Design. My name is Michael Davies, and in today's tutorial we have a special tutorial because it is the first time that I am creating in Inkscape for a video, and I've done GIMP in the past. I've been doing GIMP for the past 8 years, and so a lot of you have been asking if and when I was going to be creating Inkscape tutorials. The answer is yes. And it's today. But of course, before we get into that, I want to direct you guys over to my website at daviesmediadesign.com. As always, I have tons of video tutorials and help articles on here, so definitely check that out. I also have a brand new Inkscape help articles section where you can check out help articles on Inkscape, and I'll also be adding a tutorial section for Inkscape. And you can support our channel and help us grow by becoming a patron on Patreon. You'll get some awesome GIMP and Inkscape extras in return, so you can support us at patreon.com/daviesmediadesign. Here is the logo I'll be creating in today's tutorial. I'll also make the custom palette available for download in the description of the video. All right, so let's dive into the actual logo tutorial, and this is actually a logo I did in GIMP in an earlier tutorial on my channel. The reason I want to do it in Inkscape is that Inkscape is actually a better program for graphics like this. So when you're doing logo design, it's best to use what's called a scalable vector graphics program, which is exactly what Inkscape is. That means you can scale your graphics up or down pretty much to any size without losing quality. So this is great whenever you want to have branding options available in numerous sizes for things like business cards, billboards, etc. It's just better to do your graphics inside of an SVG program. So that being said, here is our final logo, and I'm going to start with this tutorial by coming over here and going to File, New. And I'll hold Control and use my mouse wheel to zoom out a little bit here and center up. So you guys will notice that my canvas looks a little bit different than the default canvas. I do have a couple of Inkscape help articles to go along with this video tutorial that I recommend you check out. One of those is how to make your canvas look like the Illustrator Artboard. That's how I came up with this default canvas here in Inkscape. But I'll come over here to my layers dialog. You can also click this icon right here. And you can see here that my default file has two layers. Layer 1, which is going to be the layer where our designs will be, and the background layer, which is going to contain our white background. And so this, if I unlock the background layer, is actually a square. I'll hit Control Z. All I did was take the square tool and I just dragged from the top left corner to the bottom right corner. And I just made sure that the size of my rectangle up here was 1920 by 1080. You can also come over here, click on the alignment option. And if you already have it open, it'll be over here on the side panel. And then you could just align center vertically and align center horizontally. That'll center up your rectangle on your composition here. And then of course you can click on your white swatch in your swatches panel to change the color to white. So speaking of the swatches panel, I also imported a custom swatch for this tutorial. Check out my Inkscape help article on how to import custom swatches. But once I had that imported, I just clicked on this arrow right here, and right here is my West Mountain Brewery logo swatch. And that's what brings up these colors here. So this is only 6 colors that I'll be using for today's tutorial. But coming back over here to my layers panel, I actually unlocked the background layer and selected this rectangle for a reason. The main reason is that I want to duplicate this rectangle and use it to create some center guides. That's just going to make it really easy to center up our composition while we work. So to do that, I'll just hit Control C while I have my rectangle selected. If you don't have your rectangle drawn, again, just come over here and grab your rectangle tool and just draw it from the top left to the bottom right of your entire composition. You're going to need to do this part anyway, even if you don't want your canvas to look like the Illustrator Artboard. But once I've copied this with Control C, I'll hit Control Alt V to paste in place, or you can go to Edit, Paste in Place. I'll come over here to Object, Transform. That'll bring up my transform dialog. And now what I need to do is I just need to make this rectangle half the size of my current composition. So all I need to do is come over to the Scale tab, and I'm going to change the width and height to 50. That represents percent. You can see the unit right here. And I'll come over here and hit Apply. Now we need to align this to the top left. I recommend coming over here and turning on the Snap to Page Border option. We're going to be using this later in the tutorial as well, so I do recommend just having that on for the rest of the tutorial. And then just click and drag this until it snaps to the page border. You'll see there's a message there. It says corner to corner. So once you hit that, just release. Then come up here and go to Object, Objects to Guides, And now you'll see we have center guides here. We also have these two excess guides. You can actually just drag these off of the page over on top of the rulers. That'll make those disappear. And now you'll see we have center guides here on our background layer. So come back over here to my layers panel. So everything happened on our background layer. I'll just lock that in place. And now I'll come up here to my layer 1 layer. If you guys don't have a background layer, that would have been your layer 1 layer that you were working on. Just come down here and create a new layer, and that will be our layer 1. You can rename this one background by double clicking on it. But anyway, just be clicked on layer 1 for the main design portion of this tutorial. So now I'm going to make the main circle background of our logo. To do that, I'll come over here and grab our circle tool. And then I'll come over here and I'm going to hold Control Shift and hover over the very center of our guides. Make sure you also have the Snap Guides option turned on. And so I'll just hover over the center of our guides and I'm going to hold Control Shift and I'm going to draw my circle. And you'll see this will help us draw a perfect circle. I don't want this being the entire size of the document, so I'll make it a little smaller than the document and release. Now we have our circle, and of course I need to just click on this color right here. That'll change my main foreground color to this blue color. And I can hit Shift Control F, or in my case I can click right here on the sidebar. And that is going to bring up my fill and stroke dialog, and here you can see the exact color I'm using. So in Inkscape we have the typical HTML notation, but then that's followed by two values right here, and these values represent how the alpha channel will be displayed. So you guys can type this whole thing right here. That'll give you the color, followed by FF, which means this will be 100% opaque. Of course, I do recommend downloading that custom palette, which is going to be linked below. But the next thing I'll do is I'll grab my select tool here, and I'm just gonna make sure that I have my circle selected, and I'll hit Control C, and once again, I'll hit Control Alt V to paste in place. So this is going to be the inner circle part of our logo, and so I want to turn this actually into a stroke. I want there to be a white stroke around the outside of this circle. So what I'll do is I'll come down here and I'm going to actually hold the Shift key and click, and that is going to fill my stroke area with white. And if I come over here to stroke style, you guys can see my settings. So I have the order here in terms of how my stroke is displayed set to markers, stroke, and fill. But while I have my circle selected, you'll see I have some transform handles here. So I'm going to click on this one in the bottom corner. You can really click on any of the corner ones here. And I'm just going to drag it inward, but I'm going to hold the Shift and Control key while I do that to make sure that this maintains a 1:1 aspect ratio and also transforms from the center, so it scales from the center. And I'm just going to go with about right here. So once you have this position, you can come over here to your stroke style, and I'm going to change the weight of my stroke. I'm going to go with 20. And that's not enough, so actually let me go with 30 here. That looks pretty good. So one other thing is that this shape is actually still filled in with this dark blue color. I actually don't want this to have a fill at all. I just want it to be a stroke. So if I come over here and click on this X, that will empty out the center of my circle here, and that will actually make our stroke look a little bit larger just based on the fact that part of the stroke was hidden behind that fill. So actually what I'll do is come back here and try this out with 20 again. I think that looks a little better. And I'll also come to the Align and Distribute dialog here. Again, you can use the shortcut key Shift Control A, and I'm just gonna make sure this is aligned still. Next, we need to draw our mountains. So in the GIMP tutorial, I used the Paths tool. Inkscape actually has the same tool. They just call it the Bezier curve tool. It's going to accomplish the same thing. So I'll come over here and I'm going to click on that Bezier curve tool. And now I can just draw my mountain shapes. So these can just be pretty much random looking mountain shapes. So you just need to create these mountaintops here and have them be varying in shape. And you'll see that my first node was created outside of the biggest circle here, and then my last node, same thing, created outside, and then you want it to wrap around outside the circle as well. And then you want to connect those first and last nodes. So here we have our mountain. It looks a little sloppy right now. So I'm going to come over here and grab my Edit Paths by Nodes tool, and I'm just going to edit the nodes here, and I'm just going to make them look a little bit more appealing. And I'm probably going to come back here later and adjust these once again. But I just want these to look a little bit better. That looks all right for now. So I'll come back here and grab my select tool, and I'm going to click on this orange color here inside of my palettes to fill our mountains in with orange. And then I'm going to shift click on the light blue over here, and that'll make the stroke of my mountains turn to light blue. And I'll come back here to the fill and stroke dialog. I want to increase the size of my stroke here, so I'm just going to manually increase the width. And I can always just type a value here. So let's go with 20. I actually think that looks pretty good. But now, of course, our mountains are spilling off of our logo and it doesn't look good. So what I can do is I can clip the mountains based on the shape of my circle here. So I'm gonna grab the stroke or the inner circle and I'm gonna hit Control C and then I'll hit Control Alt V to paste in place. So now we have the inner circle on top of our mountains and now we can clip our mountains to this. So I'm going to shift click on the mountains and you'll notice that my mountains layer is below the stroke layer. You want to make sure that this is the order of your objects because otherwise it's going to clip incorrectly and it's going to take on the wrong colors. So if the objects are not layered correctly, what you can do is, for example, you can click on the mountain layer and if you need to lower it in the object stacking order, you can hit the page up or page down keys on your keyboard. So I'll just shift click again on our stroke layer and now I'll come over to Object, Clip, Set, and that will clip our mountains to the shape of our inner circle. And now I need to lower the mountain object and I'll do that by hitting the page down key and now that'll go behind our stroke layer or our stroke object and our mountains are no longer spilling outside of that inner circle. So now we can start working with our text. I'll come over here and grab the text tool and I'm going to click inside of my composition here and I'll put the caps lock key on for this and I'm going to type mountain. And this is going to be part of the fictitious name of the brewery, which again is West Mountain Brewery, totally made up. So I'm just going to double click on the text to select all of it. And I'll come up here and I can change my font to any of the preloaded fonts in here, or I can just download fonts the same way I would download fonts in GIMP. And so this Animosa font I've used in past tutorials. I'll put up an Inkscape help article on how to install custom fonts for Inkscape. Pretty easy, but once you've done that, once you've selected your font, you can now change the size of your font. So in this case, I know I want my font to be 150 pixels. So I'll just type 150, hit the Enter key. Of course, you can come over here and click your text icon, and if you already have it open, it'll be over here. And this will bring up some options for you to mess around with your text, including being able to change the font size. But I'm just going to stick with adjusting it over here for the most part. So this is 150. I actually want the letters in between to be a little smaller, so I'll just select those letters. And I'll come over here and type 125 and hit the Enter key. So now those inner letters are going to be a little bit smaller than the outer letters. And I'm going to hit my Select tool here, or grab my Select tool, and then I'm going to come down here and just click on the color white because I want my text to be white. And now with that Select tool, I'm going to just position this into place a little bit better. So maybe something like right here, and we'll align this a little bit later. But now I'm going to do the next line of text, so I'll grab my text tool, and up top here, I'm going to click, and with my caps lock key still on, I'm going to type West. And once again, I'll select that, I'll come up here and type Animosa, and I'll just change the font type here to bold. And I'll increase the size of this font to 100. I'm going to click on here to change this to white. And then I'll grab my Select tool here and I'm just going to drag this one into place. So I'll do about right here, and then let me actually drag this one down a tiny bit more. Now we just have our third and final line of text. So I'll click on my text tool again, click inside my composition, and with the caps lock key on, I will type brewery. This one will be a little different. It'll be a little smaller, so I'll come up here and I'll change this to, actually let's go with 50 for the text size, hit Enter. Make sure that the font is Animosa bold. I know I did this out of order. Animosa bold here for the font. I'm going to grab my Select tool again and I'm just going to drag this a little bit lower. So about right here, I can actually drag the mountain main text a little lower as well. And actually let me click on this brewery text again. There's one more thing I want to do here. I'm going to click on this twice. That's going to bring up some different transform handles, and this one is going to be skew. So I can basically skew or shear this so that it makes our text look like it has italics on it. So just like that. I don't want to overdo it, but I do want there to be a little bit of italicizing on there. And now I'm going to come over here and click on my dark blue color because that's the color I want this to be. Next, I'm going to shift click on all my text, and I'll come back down here to Align and Distribute. And I can just collapse the text and font dialog there. I'll make sure Align is set to relative to page, and I'll just center this vertically, like so. And I'll leave the text there for now. All right, next up, I want to create a sun that's going to go behind the mountains. And I want that sun to appear as if it has a long shadow, so there is a pretty cool technique here for accomplishing this. So I'll come over here and grab my circle or my ellipse tool again, and I'm going to hold Control and Shift because I do want this to be a perfect circle, and I'm going to click and drag, and it's okay if this goes a little bit outside the circle at first. So about that size right there. I'm going to grab my select tool again and just drag this down a little bit. I'm going to left click on the dark yellow and then shift left click on the light yellow to change my foreground and stroke colors to that dark and light yellow. Then I'll come over here to fill in stroke, and I can adjust the size of my stroke if I want. So let me type 30. I think that looks a lot better. And I might want to lower this a little bit. So this is obviously covering up the mountains. We'll fix that in a minute. But first I'm going to hit Control-C to copy this. And I'm going to come back to my layers dialog here. And now I'm going to come up here and create a new layer. And I'll keep this one named Layer 2 because we're not really going to use this beyond a couple of steps here. And I'll just set the position to above current and click Add. Now that I'm on Layer 2, I'm going to hit Control-Alt-V. That'll paste my sun shape here on top of my entire composition on Layer 2. And by the way, you can click this lock icon here to just lock Layer 1 for now. But once again, I'll hit Control-C and then Control-Alt-V to paste in place. So now I'm going to create the long shadow here, and there's a couple of things I have to do to make this effect work. For starters, I need to offset this shape a little bit so that it goes off the page, and then we're basically going to connect the two shapes together to create that long shadow. So to do this, I'll come over to Object, Transform. That'll bring up my transform dialog, and I'm going to move away from scale, and I'm going to actually just make sure this is still set to 100. But I'll come over here to move, and I'm going to change the horizontal to a number that's going to make this move off of the outer circle here, or off the main logo. So I went with 350 before. And then vertical, I need this to go 350 over and then 350 down. And you do want these two numbers to be the same because that'll create a nice 45-degree angle. So now I'll come over here and change the vertical to -350. And I'm going to come down here and click Apply. And that actually didn't move that off enough, so let me just hit Control-Z to undo that. Let's go with 450 and see if that will move this off of the main logo. So hit Apply and Control-Z one more time. Let me just do 550. And there we go. All right, so now I'm going to hit Shift and select both of these objects. And I'll come over here to Path, Object to Path. Then I'll come over here to Extensions, Generate from Path, and I'll go to Interpolate. I'm going to make sure these options are set to 1 for the exponent, 200 for the interpolation steps, which is basically going to be the number of times this shape will be duplicated in between this shape. You guys will see why that's important here. And then interpolation method will be 1. You can always turn on the live preview if you want to see what this will look like. So there you can see a nice long shadow. So now I'll just click Apply, and that will apply our changes. So I'll hit Close now. And because we have Layer 1 locked, you can come back here to the Layers panel. But we have Layer 1 locked and we're on Layer 2. I can hit Control-A to select everything on Layer 2. And now I'm going to come over here and go to Object, Ungroup. And that'll make all of the instances of our sun object a different object or a unique object. So that's why you could see all of these different boxes here. But now we need to create a union between all these shapes so that they all become one shape. So to do that, I'll come over here to Path, Union. That'll make them all the same object. So now this is one long object. And then I'll come over here and click on this light yellow color because I want it to be light yellow. And finally, I'll hit Control-X to copy that because I don't want this to be on a separate layer from our sun layer. And what I'll do now is I'm actually going to just delete this layer 2. So I'll just hit the minus button, which is the delete the current layer icon. And now I'm on Layer 1. Let me unlock this. And I'll hit Control-Alt-V to paste in place. And then with this object selected, I'm going to hit the page down option. And that will reveal the sun we created earlier. So next I need to get rid of any of this excess here that's spilling outside of the inner circle in terms of the sun ray. So what I'll do is I'll click on the inner circle, hit Control-C, and then hit Control-Alt-V to paste in place. Now what I'll do is I'll click to fill this in with white, and then I'll shift click to get rid of the stroke. And then I'll go over here to Path, Object to Path, and I'm actually going to click on the sun ray and do the same thing. So Path, Object to Path. Now if I shift click on both of these objects, I can come up here and go to Object, Clip, and then choose Set. And that is going to clip out our object right here. So if I hold Control and zoom in, you can see the sun ray no longer goes outside the inner circle. It's overlapping it right now, but that's not a big deal because we're gonna move this backwards so that it's below a lot of these objects. So actually what I need to do though is make sure I'm still clicked on the sun ray object and then shift click on my sun and come over here and go to Object, Group. And then I'm gonna use the page down key and just move that object down so that it is below the mountains. So that looks pretty good there. I'll hold Control and use my mouse wheel to zoom out. So just a couple of things left to do here. For one, I'm going to click on my Edit Paths by Node tool and just once again adjust the mountains a little bit more just to make them look a little bit better. So maybe something like that. I just don't want them to cover up the sun quite as much. This is kind of optional right here. All right, so the last thing I'll do for this tutorial is just add a text stroke here to our main mountain text. And to do that, I'll just click on this with my select tool here. And I'll hit Control C to copy that and then Control Alt V to paste in place. Now I'll come down here and shift click on this blue to give this a blue stroke. You can also click on the X here to get rid of the white color here in the middle. So now this only has a stroke. And I'm gonna come over here to the stroke width, and by the way, make sure you are on the fill and stroke dialog. And I'll just type 40, hit the Enter key. And now I just need to lower this layer so that it's below all the other layers. So you may need to click off it real quick and click back on and make sure you don't lower the width of the stroke. And then just hit the page down key until that goes below all the other layers. And now I'll come over here to my layers dialog and I can hide the background layer. So this is what this will look like with the transparent background. So now we need to save this file, and Inkscape by default uses a .svg file type. That ensures that our vector drawings are going to be available should we open this up in the future. So we can always come in and scale this up or down without quality loss. We can also send it to somebody like the printer with a transparent background here. And so to save this, I'll just go to File, Save, and I can just navigate on my computer to where I want to save this. And then I can type in the name of my composition. So I'll go West, and let me turn off my caps lock, West Mountain Brewery logo, hit the Enter key, and now our file is saved as an SVG. All right, so that's it for my very first Inkscape tutorial. Hopefully you guys liked it. If you did, you could subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/daviesmediadesign. You can visit my website at daviesmediadesign.com, and you can support my channel and help us grow by becoming a patron on Patreon. And I'll include a link to that as well as all the relevant links from this tutorial in the description of the video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.